Hello there, everybody. Welcome back to Star Wars Lads for this week's live Q&A and stream. We're excited to talk to you all about some of the latest news stories around Star Wars, as well as take your guys' questions and comments. So anything you would like to discuss in the comment section, leave it in the chat and we will get to it. First come, first serve. We have a lot of comments already. So we will be going through those. If you want to make sure you get a comment on tonight's stream, make sure you send in a super chat. It helps the channel out greatly, bumps you up to the top. We will get to it for sure. And if you're watching this on replay and you've never joined us for one of these live streams, join us every single Tuesday night. We are on the West Coast, so we go live about 7:30 Pacific time. Make sure you check out our live streams and join in the conversation. We have a great group of fans here who love to discuss all things Star Wars, but not just Star Wars. You can discuss anything you would like in the chat. So make sure you send it in and we will get to it as soon as we can. We don't really have any Star Wars news this week, everybody. It's an unfortunate week. Last week, we kind of had the, small story that Ewan McGregor is still working on some ideas for Obi-Wan Kenobi. And that ended up being a very fun topic of conversation that a lot of you really enjoyed discussing. And we didn't even get to our second story, which is, kind of more pertinent for the immediate future of Star Wars. So that will lead our show is what was the second story last week. And then we have a couple other things to talk about. But this is, I keep saying this every week, but this is more so than any week we've had since the Acolyte, a week that will be driven by your guys' questions and comments. So if you have things you've wanted to ask us or about anything, again, it can be about anything, it doesn't have to be about Star Wars, things you have wanted to send into the chat for a long time, most likely we'll get through a lot of these chats tonight because there is very, very little to discuss in the world of Star Wars news. But let's lead off with the video topic, and that's going to be that Skeleton Crew about a week ago, 8 days ago, did get a leak online. And of course, it is always a product leak that tells us some of this stuff. And it revealed 11 characters' names from the show, namely the main cast of kids who we didn't know their names at all. So, running it down here, we start with Jude Law's character. Jude Law's character is named Jod Nanawood. And that's an interesting name. I I don't know. I don't know how I feel about the last name, but I'm
John
sure
and
it'll work
Norwood.
fine. Nanawood. Interesting. Let us know what you guys think about Jude Law. We also have the pirate captain. It's all they're named in this post, but we did get a confirmation in the picture from our magazine a few weeks ago that they released for a couple stills from Skeleton Crew that this captain's name is Brutus. Then you have Neil, who's one of the Max Rebo species characters, and Jorka, the other one of the same species. The one with the augmented kind of visor is KB. And then we have the kids Wim and Fern. Wim and Fern are two humanoid characters. And then the owl creature that you see in the trailer, that character is known as Kim. Now, Kim is another one that I look at and go, okay, I don't know about Kim. That's a pretty common real world name. But the way it could be used with an owl, maybe the Kim has a last name that makes it a bit more Star Warsy. I can deal with that rather than a human being named Kim. I think it works a little bit better. The droid we've been seeing in a lot of the promotional material is SM-33. And that wraps up the characters that we know, because I guess, yeah, the last two is just Wim on a speeder bike and then a Chase. It just says Chase. Uh, so those are the characters. We got 9 character reveals. What do you guys think of some of these character names? Let us know in the comments. Sonic, passing it to you. What are your thoughts on some of the names of these Skeleton Crew characters?
I find it pretty interesting that under Disney Star Wars, everything has kind of been these 1 or 2 syllable names, right? Just nice and short, which, makes it a little bit more easier to just remember. Kind of simplicity wins over everything else. But it does feel like you start to have names that kind of do rhyme a little bit more. with, other series, other movies. So I'm not sure just how much they can really stretch it out. I will say Jod Nanawad has grown on me. That was not a name I really enjoyed the first time I said it, but it just feels like something that, pirates would be, like, singing in, like, a merry way and, have a little fun with, and it's almost like a pirate's name, like, almost like kinda how Kanan Jarrus is a name that Caleb Doom takes for himself. I wonder if at least part of Jod Nanawad is some nice little almost like alliteration, a little fun and whimsy that the pirates easily sing in their cantina as well. They're on their ships having a good drunken time or something. So yeah, I can see that. The kids, I guess. I mean, I know there's Neil, and then there's looks like another character that's Jorka, and they look like they're kind of the same species, maybe brothers or siblings or something. Um, Chase, I don't really mind it. Fern, I don't really mind it. Wim, it's probably better. AB does seem like a name that kind of goes with because we've seen the character kind of put down the visor, so I'm not really sure if a kid necessarily has full cybernetic augmentations quite yet, but maybe this is like someone who's almost wants to be like that. Like this is who they feel more comfortable as, and this is just their way of like expressing themselves a little bit more and what they're more comfortable in that kind of persona that they kind of create with themselves. Um, but Kim and Smee, I like Kim. Just almost feels like some wise old owl, and great creature effects just from what we've seen, and I'm excited for Smee as well because very bone-like structure, and it almost reminds me of the word glee, and it feels like he's gonna have this kinda turn from, like, this pirate droid that's, like, always like, "Oh, why do I have to do this?" to by the end of the story being like, "I'm so happy that I'm with these kids and having a merry time." So, you know, not not too much to talk about there, but yeah, it is interesting that we're really just kinda sticking to first names and maybe only names for some of these characters. I was kinda hoping to see a little bit more last names, especially for the human characters at least. I can kinda understand with aliens, either you have super long ones or just like, this is the being known as Kim or something. But yeah, we'll see. I mean, these are kinda leaks too. We might hear
Yeah.
more in the show itself.
Yeah, we should get our like the marketing really ramped up here soon. I mean, we're almost done with Agatha, which is the main Disney show that they're propping up on their social media right now. So I'd imagine once Agatha ends, it's all skeleton crew, and we're gonna have a lot to talk about in terms of information coming out about the initial plot and maybe another trailer and some of the character details, backstory. But yeah, I mean, I'm pretty similar. Is that what we're calling the droid? Is that how they're calling him, Smee, instead
I
of
would think so, right? I know you could do
SM-33?
SM-33, but it feels like, you know, BB-8, right? You're trying to go for
Yeah,
just saying the vowels and the pronunciation. SME just seems like a
because
nice, easy way to kinda work around it.
yes, because Smee, if he's related to the pirate, Smee is the right hand
Yeah,
man of Captain Hook and Peter
there you
Pan,
go.
so that's another connection there. But yeah, I think in general, this doesn't the names. I could care less about the names, to be honest. It doesn't really matter as long as they're good characters. But I like, I love the designs. I love how many aliens we're using. I just think this is going to be such a fun show, and the more and more we get about different looks at them, like even toy looks at them, right? It still feels like we're getting new sides of how well this part of the galaxy will be fleshed out in the show, and that's pretty exciting. We do have some comments about some of the names. Skywalker's Academy says Nana Wood is also a Jedi, and I think Vane was a man in Mando season 3. Yes, he was, and was one of the pirates who escaped. Yes, he was in Mandalorian season 3, and then yes, from that other promotional image, we did have some of the pirates revealed, like Gunter, who's being played by Jaleel White, which is also going to be a fun addition to the pirate crew. But yeah, a lot of cool things around this show. I think lots of things to get excited about. I mean, I think once we learn more about its larger place in the galaxy, I think we can truly figure out if we have concerns for the show or not. But I think staying separate, at least for the majority of season one, is the ideal goal. And hopefully, this show finds its audience. I think it's going to be quite fun. Anthony also says, "Hey guys, excited to see Skeleton Crew. It's been a while since we've had a coming of age story in Star Wars. I just hope those kids just don't get hate thrown at them." Yeah, I hope not too. And it's a sad reality we live in. It really is that is a possibility. But I think this show is going to surprise a lot of people. I really do.
Yeah, just gotta wait and see. This is not one of those shows that has necessarily the same hype as what like an Acolyte had, what a Mandalorian, a Book of Boba Fett, and Obi-Wan. This is kind of like if we really want to do a comparison, maybe almost like a Guardians of the Galaxy to the rest of the MCU. You're like, who are these characters? Why do they have to be in this time period and be connected to the story in some way? And maybe they could be the breakout hit, right? They do have the biggest budget for aliens, like designs and creatures. And I was already quite impressed by Acolyte, at least pushing on that front, having more alien diversity compared to the rest of the TV shows that we've had so far. So if that only continues further here, it plays more into that kinda 80s fantasy tropes, the child fantasy tropes, pirate stories, and all that, so, yeah, I would think that could actually play really, really well with that early New Republic aesthetic and people on the fringe of that.
Yeah, definitely. And it's man, this is just gonna be hopefully just a show that goes all out with all that. Like just give it to us. Don't hold back. I like that they're creating creatures as well. Like Kim, I'm not is that a design we've seen before in Star It's not in movies or TV. I don't know
I
if
don't
this
think
owl
so.
creature is in anything else. I'm sure we've had something related to it at some point, but yeah, I like, even though it is just an owl and it's I'm having a hard time separating it yet from like owl in Winnie the Pooh. Uh, even though it's just an owl, I think it's a fun design. We're embracing the childlike nature of Star Wars, really, really giving us the Saturday morning cartoon vibe that George wanted to do, the serialized Saturday morning serial vibe. So I think the show's going to nail that, and hopefully not too many Star Wars fans have grown so far apart from George's original vision of like this is for 12-year-olds. Uh, really, it's this type of show is for probably even younger audience than that. Hopefully, we can kind of embrace a different side of Star Wars because I think this would be a really cool thing to add, as long as it has mature themes on top of being more of a kid-friendly show. I think that's going to be pretty cool. The Critical Thinker says, "Have you guys checked out the first issue of Absolute Batman?" I have not. I've kind of completely gone away from reading singles, so I've not checked it out. How is it? Is it a good run? I feel like I haven't heard anybody talk about any Batman runs recently or miniseries. Is it a Black Label series? I think it is. But no, I have not checked it out. Anthony says, I also recently watched the 1931 Dracula film for the first time. It was awesome. Bela Lugosi was perfect for the role. Yes, he absolutely was. And it's a great movie. All those Universal movies are great. Those early ones are awesome. Frankenstein for sure too. I think Bride of Frankenstein and Frankenstein are my two favorites of all the original Universal monster movies, and Dracula would probably come right in at 3. But Bela Lugosi's awesome, and that movie has such great atmosphere. I think it still holds up really well today. Have you seen any of those monster movies, Sonic?
I've seen parts of Frankenstein, definitely seen The Invisible Man at some point.
Oh, yeah, that's a good
Uh,
one too.
yeah, The Cabinet of, I'm blanking,
Dr. Caligari.
Caligari. I've seen clips of it more just for, like, the German expressionism and kinda how it's, like, played out. Um, yeah, no, I haven't really I actually, no, I have seen Victor Frankenstein. That one is pretty
Okay,
funny. I really do like the
yeah.
humor in that one. That, like, holds up surprisingly well too, so, like, sometimes you can feel, like, humor of, like, different
Is that
especially black and white films is, like, period specific, but, like, that one was just, like, it just works even now.
is that the one with Daniel Radcliffe?
No, no, maybe I'm getting the name wrong. Um, It is a Frankenstein film, but I'm trying to think which one it was. Uh,
Okay. Yeah, 'cause I was
yeah,
like, that
are
was
you talking
pretty
about the
recent.
James McAvoy?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. No, maybe I'm getting the name right or wrong, but yeah, it's fairly famous. It's like a comedy. What is it? Let me look it up.
Okay, so, yeah, Critical Thinker says
Young
oh,
Frankenstein,
okay,
not
with,
yeah, yeah,
Gene
yeah.
Wilder.
Gene Wilder. I'm like, this is someone who's pretty notable too. So it's like, yeah, Victor Frankenstein is that weird action-packed one that James McAvoy. I was kind of interested when that first was like out in the trailer, and then I heard the reviews are god awful.
Oh, man, yeah, I haven't thought about that movie in years. I don't know how I, like, thought of that. When you said it, I was like, "Isn't that with Daniel Radcliffe?" But, yeah, Young Frankenstein is a good one. That's funny. In the same year, Mel Brooks did Blazing Saddles too, which is, defining year of his career. And then Critical Thinker says the Absolute Batman is the first in DC's equivalent of the Ultimate Universe. Okay, interesting. So they're trying to modernize. I have not really kept up with recent DC comics, so I did not even aware was not even aware they were doing that. That's interesting though, because like Marvel, one of the things about the Ultimate Universe was that Marvel had no other universes. So they had this, modernized version of these character origin stories, whereas DC has always done Elseworlds tales at the very least, where they could, take this story and just do that instead. Or, you have a million different universes in DC that you could have a new modernized Batman origin in. So, and that's interesting to me that they would decide to go with an entirely new, like, modernized universe if it is in the vein of Ultimates, but oh, it's written by Scott Snyder. Okay, then I'll definitely check it out at some point. That is one of my favorite Batman runs. I think that is, what do you think, Critical Thinker? I think in general, Scott Snyder's run is the best overall single author Batman run. Even though it ends on kind of a weak note, there aren't too many, like, because I don't know, for me, Grant Morrison's, it's not one cohesive run. He jumps around to a bunch of different series, he creates a bunch of different things. So I don't know if I could say Grant Morrison is one full run as like a one title, one character focused Batman run. I feel like Scott Snyder's is the one to beat. I mean, Adams and O'Neill is great, and I love that one, but it is less of a run and more like they keep going with new stories every single time. Yeah, they have the demon stuff in there. But yeah, I don't know. I can't think of anybody off the top of my head that I would pick over Scott Snyder's New 52 run, because like the first 7 volumes of that are incredible. Volume 6 is a little bit of a downturn. Other than that, I think it's pretty great. And Critical Thinker agrees with me. Snyder's Batman run is absolute classic. Haven't finished Morrison's run so far, but aside from that, it's definitely among my favorites. Yeah, Morrison's run, it's tough because Morrison's run, without spoiling anything, it starts in Batman and Detective, and then he does Final Crisis, which changes everything, and then you have the return of Batman stuff and Batman and Robin and Batman Incorporated, and it's like all these other sides that don't necessarily connect to true like Batman or Detective Comics. So I don't know, it's different, but I mean, it's a great run, but it's not a pure Batman run like Snyder's. Anyway, uh, back to the comments. The next one is also Critical Thinker. Says I finally read Children of the Jedi. Oh boy. Uh, it was about as bad as I expected, not even because of the dumb plot, but just because the prose is so utterly confusing. Yeah, it's awful. It is awful. So bad in every way. I remember when I finished it, or when I got towards the end, and you have a lot of the wrap up with Luke and with Callista, and I think he calls her babe, and that was like, okay, you've completely lost me in any form. I just no, not we're not doing, like, Luke Skywalker just doesn't, it just doesn't, no, it doesn't work. So the writing's terrible, the story's terrible, and the way they kind of try to modernize a Luke Skywalker relationship, like Luke should be a more corny relationship to me. That's why I think the Mara Luke stuff works so well. They're certainly opposites. But yeah, Children of the Jedi is terrible.
You didn't enjoy the romance with the computer and
No,
having it inhabit a sort of dead person, but not really in the same way. I guess the modern comparison is almost Wonder Woman 84 there,
yeah. Oh God, yeah.
which is
Also
also not
quite bad.
great.
Might be slightly better than Children of the Jedi, but that's telling you guys how bad Children of the Jedi is. Uh, yeah, Critical Thinker says I've also gotten about 25% through Dark Saber, and it's
Mm.
better so far, but not a fan of Kevin J. Anderson's writing style. I liked Young Jedi Knights and Tales of the Jedi, but man, the JAT was not very good. What is JAT? Why am I blanking on what that is?
Um,
Huh.
Jedi Academy trilogy?
Oh, Jedi. Okay, yeah, I've
Yeah.
never seen it. People hyphen it like that or shorthand it like that. But yeah, you're right. I like Jedi Academy trilogy's story, but I agree that his writing can be kind of questionable, and also some of the Jedi Academy trilogy also feels like it's over long. It didn't need to be a trilogy, and there's just some very strange things that he does in that. Like I know I made a video on my other channel making fun of his turbo skiing opening for the
Oh
second
god.
book. There's just random things in Jedi Academy trilogy that pull you out of it because the story is, I mean, it's like Dark Empire, right? The story is over the top and ridiculous, but I enjoy, especially Jedi Search. I kind of like that book because that one's the most grounded of the three. But I enjoy the overall journey. It's just the individual books and the writing can really take you out of it. And I would agree about Dark Saber because I'm not a huge Kevin J. Anderson person with Dark Saber as well. I think his novels in Star Wars are his weakest writing because he does a good job, and maybe we got to give more credit to Rebecca Moesta who co-wrote all of the books with him for Young Jedi Knights. But it seems like he's more tame when the story needs to be told in 200 pages, and it's like a quick, short, to the point story where you've got about 3, 4 characters that you're enhancing instead of having to tell a big Star Wars galaxy spanning story. But Dark Saber's kind of the same way, where I think it's a weaker written book than Jedi Academy trilogy, but it also has a kind of interesting story and some lore that's actually pretty important for the overall like 90s EU. So there are some cool things in Dark Saber, and I think the more and more you get through it, you're going to enjoy it. Definitely a lot of connections to Jedi Academy. But when you read through Planet of Twilight and you've already done Children of the Jedi, you're gonna be like, wow, Dark Saber seems like a masterpiece compared to those two. But it is, to me, it is one that's like both overhyped and overhated. A lot of people who like to group all three together really, really hate on Dark Saber. And then Kevin J. Anderson defenders are very much so very pro Dark Saber, and I don't think it's nearly as good as a lot of very Kevin J. Anderson heavy fans think it is. That a lot of people have kind of started to hype up Dark Saber in the last few years, and it doesn't live up to that.
It's been a weird book to follow its, like, trajectory because it's sandwiched in between the Hambly books, which, no matter what, even people who, like, love some of the ideas and concepts of those books, they can't really argue, like, "Oh, it's so wonderfully written." They're like, it's so strange and fun and weird in the worst and best ways. And then
Yeah,
Darksaber is, like, fairly common, right? So it's, like, being elevated because there's something worse. Um, I can see the arguments though that Darksaber is better written than at least, Champions of the Force and what's the other book from, uh, Jedi Academy trilogy? I'm blanking on the name.
there's Jedi Surge, Jedi Twilight, and Champions of the Force.
Yeah, so
Right?
Jedi Twilight and Champions of the
Is it
Force,
Jedi
right?
Twilight?
Um,
Is
maybe
that
not Jedi Surge. I also agree. I
that's
have a bit of a
Coruscant Nights?
oh, yeah,
Yeah,
wait, no, it's
Jedi Quest. Is it
Jedi
Jedi Quest?
no,
Something like that. Quest. Oh God.
let's see, what is it? Dark Apprentice. That's the
Dark
second book.
Apprentice.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think it's probably better written Dark Saber than Dark Apprentice and Champions of the Force. I do have a soft spot for Jedi Search, even if I don't really like it that much these days. That was the first ever Star Wars book I owned, along with Assault on Salonia, which, that's a weirder book to pick up considering it's the middle book of the trilogy, but I'll always remember it for Mara Jade navigating Leia out through an escape on, like, multiple floors, the writing of but yeah, no, Jedi Search, I think you're right. It does have some. I think it's because it's the start of the story. It's fleshing out that world, and it's not necessarily the responsibility of Darksaber. So you can kinda go for the MacGuffins, you can kinda go for just fleshing out a little bit more of the world that's already pre-existing. So there's less work to do for Darksaber, and so maybe that's why it seems a little better, but if there is a little bit more creativity in Jedi Search, I favor that anyways.
Yeah, definitely. I think Jedi Search is like I said earlier, it's the most grounded, and I think that's one of the reasons why it works best for me. It's also Luke Skywalker led instead of being more heavy on Kip Duran.
Yeah.
Um, but but
Vima de Boda and all that random stuff,
yeah.
which works in that book compared to
Well,
some of the crazier things that start happening.
and in Dark Apprentice, I do like the beginning where you start to get more connections to Tales of the Jedi. You
Yeah,
get the Exar Kun stuff. You get a better look at Luke's academy. I think like it really is the third book when you lose Luke, and then obviously you go on the Kip stuff, where it starts to fall apart a bit. But yeah, they're all kind of goofy in their own way. I think it is when you read the '90s EU, basically everything outside of what Zahn wrote, and what Stackpole wrote. You gotta take it as like Star Wars didn't have anything to it besides the original trilogy, um, in terms of film and television. So they were saying everybody who was writing it was thinking, okay, this is sci-fi. Let me try this. Oh, this is something from a sci-fi book that I read in the 50s. Let me try this.
yeah,
And it gets you have to take it as kind of a piece of 50s sci-fi pulp, but in the 90s. You have to really look at it from a different lens that you critique pretty much anything post New Jedi Order Star Wars, because even New Jedi Order has some of that, but since it was being written during the production of the Phantom Menace, and then through the Phantom Menace and after the Phantom Menace, you do get a little bit more of the grounding that happens in like the weight in the world of the politics around Star Wars. And it's also post Hand of Thrawn when Zahn comes back and like re-solidifies what the EU is. So yeah, there are plenty of things in those middle books from the 90s that you're going to be like, what the heck? What is this? And you can only either embrace it for the cheesiness, or you can be like, I don't like this. I got to go to a different era of Star Wars. And I think both are pretty fair.
yeah, and that's the nature of, like, military sci-fi being a lot more of established genre by the '90s, especially with stuff like aliens and pop culture, stuff like the Orson Scott books with the Ender series and all that. It's a lot easier to, like, rely on terminology, rely on tactics, rely on things that have just been built off of something that is tangible to the real world, especially '80s and '90s when the awareness of a possible Cold War, a nuclear war, military conflicts around the world with the Soviet Union collapsing and all that. Like that was more
Mhm.
on the forefront for those generation of children and the writers that wrote for them and stuff like that, right? Now it's like we've definitely had that, but we've also had George Lucas, like you said, go in his own crazy tangents, for better or worse. Not necessarily being reined in and revised like he was in the original trilogy, even though the man was asking for that sort of supervision. It is purely altruistic in so many ways, but it's also like I do wonder how the writing around the books in the early 2000s would have kind of been shaped if he was kind of kept more in rein with the books kind of the same struggles of the '90s of like, what are we writing for? What are the things we can build off of that isn't necessarily there? It's like almost like George is like, here is every thought I could have put out here with my budget, with my merchandising, backing it. Now you can align it, make it a little bit nicer and cleaner. That it is pretty interesting to look at like the prequels as a testing ground for the rest of the era, whereas the original trilogy had a lot of predefined things already and was very clean cut for the most part. So when you start to try to flesh it out in your own ways, you're like, I don't have much to reference. There is like almost these very rigid rules and very concrete examples and arguably untouchable examples to really do without feeling like you're mimicking things, which again, a lot of Bantam era still does. They're like, oh, another Imperial Remnant, oh, another dark side related thing, right? Like it was hard. And so I think you have to give a lot of credit for Tom Veitch, even if him and Zahn did not see eye to eye at all. He was the one who really pushed Tales of the Jedi, Dark Empire to try crazy things. I wouldn't say Dark Empire necessarily works for me past maybe like the 60% mark. And I definitely don't love a lot of Dark Empire 3. 2 has some interesting things with the light side of the Force and like, the people that Luke runs into on Gnosis and all that. But I would say Tales of the Jedi as a whole, even if it has some really cheesy writing and very uneven art style, it does feel still really reminiscent about some of the things that Lucas eventually kind of went to with the prequel trilogy, what we saw with KOTOR, what we're still seeing now with the High Republic and all that. That sense of even more boundless like potential for the Jedi, for the galaxy, for the storytelling. So, rest in peace to that guy. But it's it's kind of crazy just thinking about how much of the 90s, how much of how Star Wars is written kind of comes down to just how well that Star Wars movies of that era was received.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, Tales of the Jedi, the cheesiness works so much better in it
Galore.
because it's 90s comics. Like,
Yeah,
90s comics are drenched in that style, and so
yeah.
it doesn't necessarily feel as dated as the novels because it feels like just a product of that time. I mean, yeah, I guess if you're used to reading current Star Wars comics and you go back, it's still gonna be dated, but if you know anything about 90s comics, it it feels like reading 90s comics. So yeah, definitely worth checking that out though, because I think out of most 90s comic stuff that we got, it holds up pretty darn well. Especially from like early Dark Horse. And it is one of the more memorable and important stories from early Dark Horse. Critical Thinker says, what do you think of the canceled Clone Wars arcs we never got to see, especially stuff like the Boba Fett Cad Bane arc that they've referenced but hasn't even gotten a book or comic? Yeah, they have two really good arcs that they haven't done books or comics for, and it was the Boba Fett Cad Bane stuff, and it was Crystal Crisis. Both were really good. It is a shame. I don't think you can find them anymore. The animatics. You'll have to just look up people's
Only on
videos
YouTube.
or read stuff. Yeah, it's unfortunate. They've made it a little harder to find, but they are pretty cool. Worth checking out if you guys like the Clone Wars. It was anything basically from season 5 after in Clone Wars has been really good to great, minus the Martez sisters. And so, in that same vein, it's high level Star Wars Clone Wars storytelling.
Yeah, no, it is kind of a shame that we can't really get to see more of that. Like, we can only kind of see the compilation of some of the stuff shown at Celebration and D23 and stuff for like Legacy and all that. Legacy used to be such a foundational piece of the Star Wars website before it got like the full Disney transformation. It's a bit of a shame. I wish I wish we got to have a little bit more with those stories. Obviously, Dark Disciple got adapted, but there's still always the, like, need for me, especially now that we've got Ventress back in the Bad Batch, to see, like, a proper adaptation, like, as a almost like a feature length, like, maybe like an animated feature length, like the Clone Wars movie-esque, just special presentation on Disney Plus, adapting the majority of that book. I think that'd be something that just throw out a couple nice animated episodes just for people to, like, still feel like, "Okay, we're still getting things that eventually would have been told if we didn't have any of these breaks and sales and everything." The one I still kinda wanna see, and I wish we almost continued Clone Wars and then had Siege of Mandalore come later, is the R2 and Captain Rex Top Gun style storyline, because I think that would have hit pretty well with how big of a hit Top Gun Maverick ended up being, right? I think, and that really apparently was supposed to feed into kind of their like moments of dynamic that you see in Siege of Mandalore with how he's like him and R2 are like super chill and like ready to work, and everyone else is kind of groaning like they've got some there some sort of new dynamic that isn't really, I don't think, ever touched upon in the Clone Wars. Like they're in the
Mhm,
same group, but they're not necessarily friends, sort of thing, right? So I wanted to see that one. I don't know about the Kashyyyk one, right? Because we kind of got it semi-adapted with Gunji, but I really wish we got to see the original design with the red paint for Echo before they kind of went with the Bad Batch look. Bit of a shame because I thought that was nice having like the double, um, what is it? The double, I don't know what they call that, pauldron, double pauldron look, right?
mhm.
Yes, but yeah, I don't know how much more you could do past that, honestly, because it feels like you're starting to stretch it. But yeah, it would have been nice to still, I don't know. I'd still like to see some things like Boba Fett storyline, especially too, because that is basically confirmed with when we see Cad Bane with his hat off in the Bad Batch. You see that skull cap, which comes from that shot from their duel that is implied to be that training when Boba first really suits up, and we know he suits up because that's what he's wearing and it's described to be wearing that, at least that first version of that green armor, Mandalorian armor in Dark Disciple. So bit of a shame for things that we've lost, but still pretty happy that we got a season 7 in the first place.
Critical Thinker says, "What's your favorite new canon only character?" That's a tough one.
Ooh,
I think when it comes to, like, books and literature and comics, then we have to go to, like, Doctor Aphra and
yeah,
Black Chrysanthemum, that whole crew. I really like BT and Triple Zero. Um, Obviously, we have the games. You have Cal Kestis, BD1, Seer, I think, became a really good character, Trilla. But then, even though they're canon only, I don't really think about the movies as much, being canon only, right? Because they're films. It feels like it's more of a part of Star Wars. But I do really love Rogue One. I really love K2SO and Cassian Andor. Andor is canon only. Cassian is
yeah.
great. Luthen's great. And obviously Mando and Grogu. Love them. Yeah, it's hard to pick a favorite. Kylo Ren, I also still really like. I think, episode 9 doesn't necessarily do the best job for his story, in my opinion, but I still love Adam Driver's performance for the most part. I would say my favorite out of all of them, I would lean towards probably Cassian and K2 right now. Din Djarin has that room to become my favorite. I think he's pretty great, but uh, they didn't do that much with him in Mando season 3. uh, they didn't focus on his character as much. And hopefully, with him leading the film, and then whatever follows, more sequels to this possible film series, we get some definitive Din Djarin storytelling because I think he could be pretty great. I feel like I'm missing some people, but yeah, those are the ones off the top of my head that aren't in Legends at all that I really do love in canon.
Yeah, and we can always definitely highlight the High Republic as well. Like that is a
Yeah,
huge, huge repository of characters. Elzar Mann, Avar Chris, just yeah, just so many fun characters. Bel Zettifar is always one that I like to see because he has like the most physical struggles throughout every book, right? Buryaga's probably he's probably gone past Lobaka for me just because I do respect the Wookiees. Like, I don't want to be translated. You guys understand how I feel through the Force. Whereas Lobaka's at the same time, on the other hand, Lobaka's like, I'll build myself a little like vocal droid. Like, it's a really interesting seeing how like Wookiees could also have like a very different way of like expressing themselves and how they want to be interpreted. And yeah, but I mean, Ar- uh, Arkoff is also pretty good Wookiee. There's a lot of Wookiees. I do like the Kelnaka one shot that came out, and he's going to be a big player in the upcoming second Phase 3 Marvel Comics run. So excited to see him get fleshed out. Man, there's so much. I mean, Mark Andro is definitely one of the best villains in
yeah.
canon, right, for sure. There was a period where I would say he almost kind of stalled out a bit for me because of how Phase 3 kind of starts. But again, we're kind of basing it off what people are saying, but I think where we left off with Tears of the Nameless, not Tears of the Nameless, sorry, Temptation of the Force, some of the huge plot elements of Tears of the Nameless, and the rumors about Tempest Breaker and all that, it feels like we're starting to get that character back to that like phase one intensity and shape. And he's been popping up in the comics too and kind of doing some crazy things there, which I've liked. So yeah, he's good. I do like that. And Marta Rowe is a character I would love to return to. Just insane and not in the way that you expect, considering she is predecessor, an ancestor to Markion. Yeah, great stuff all around. I don't know like what else I could really pull out. I'm trying to think of like comic exclusive characters. I
Yeah,
mean,
that was where my head went too.
it's tough because I would argue Sabe never gets to become a character in Legends, but here in the Handmaidens in general are just get to have so much time with the Queen's trilogy and with the Darth Vader line. Big fan of what's done there, right? It's yeah, I don't know. I'm trying to think of like other comic book characters.
I thought of a
Uh,
book one that I really love. I forgot to say earlier. Eli Vanto from the Thrawn
oh
book,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
another great one. But yeah, I forgot about, or I guess we're missing some big ones here. Don't think about it being canon only, but Rebels, Kanan,
Oh,
Ezra,
of course, yeah.
Sabine, Zeb, Hera, Chopper, of course. So yeah, after revising that, maybe Kanan might be my favorite. Um, but yeah, there's a lot of good ones. Like Canon's now been around for 10 years, and like we've said, Legends was around for 35 years before it got canceled. So or 37 years before it got canceled, 35 before Disney bought Lucasfilm. So we still have a long way to go for canon to have even close to a similar library, but there have been some great characters that feel like the fundamental DNA. Like when you asked that question, my head went to, okay, what are some like random characters that people don't really know that might be in Star Wars canon, without really thinking about the fact that we have 5 Star Wars canon live action movies. We have all these shows. We have Rebels, which feels kind of partially Legends because it came out so early in canon.
So early.
Um, but yeah, I think Kanan and Ezra, but
Sabine
Kanan,
is really good. Hair is really good. Yeah,
yeah,
it's a. I mean, it's crazy to think about it, but Zeb is probably the weakest, and that's only because his story basically is wrapped up by the end of season two, right?
yeah,
And he has a very interesting storyline as well, right? So some good characters all
Grand
around.
Inquisitor.
Grand Inquisitor
uh,
is really great too. Yeah,
yeah,
man.
there's been some
Marin,
great ones
obviously
all
from the
around.
Jedi. Marin
Yeah,
and
Marin.
Grease. Yeah, man. I'm
All
trying to
lots
think.
of great characters in canon that feel, when you think of canon only characters, unfortunately, your head kind of immediately goes to like the controversial ones or the ones people like to hate on. But there are a lot of great ones that pretty much universally are loved, and
Yeah.
that is a testament to how many different types of stories we've gotten in canon so far. But yeah, good question. Thanks for that one. Okay, so we have a couple more topics we want to run down for the news, and then we'll get right back to your guys' questions. And we could pass it over to Sanak for one he wanted to discuss. What is the topic? It's about Acolyte, correct?
Yeah, so I haven't really seen this on Reddit anywhere on like the Star Wars Leaks subreddit, but this is something from Star Wars Meg, who's a pretty notable YouTube channel. She admittedly wasn't a big fan of the show, but she did share these rumored leaks that she also says to take with a grain of salt about what season two was purported to be like, what was gonna go on there. So yeah, go to her channel, check it out if you guys want to. But if you want to kind of get a quick summary of it, there would have been some pretty interesting storylines. Like for example, the Chimer Osha romance would have continued and been a little bit more explicit. But we would have seen some interesting things about how they're like working to destabilize and like build up the criminal underworld and stuff like that. So she would have had like this almost like Dune gladiator sequence under Jabba the Hutt's like arenas and fought and kind of tried to destabilize and work as an assassin there. We would have had Chimera and her like duo on Baldemic, which it would have been named in season two. And we would have found out Chimera and Osha are kind of disagreeing, even if they are together, because she wants that pure freedom that Chimera was talking about and promised. but Chimera is actually, like, mining for the banking clans for Plagueis unknowingly, like, all the, um, what is it called? What's that? Cortosis, not
Cortosis.
yeah, Cortosis, veins on Beldamic, but and she's not a fan of that, in their fights, there would've been some really cool visuals described. We would've seen, like, almost flashes to a little bit more of that story between him and Vernestra, who's presumed to be his master, and how he got that scar there. There were some pretty interesting things there. When we come to the flip side with May, May would have been like kind of like having almost like this little chess slash therapy session with Master Yoda, who kind of takes her under his wing. Is trying to like heal her, let her become like almost like a regular Jedi under, like, very strict supervision. He's kinda helping out with the library more so than, becoming a proper Jedi and stuff like that. Rain Court, we would've seen a little bit more of, like, the political audit that's kinda going on, and Vernestra kinda realizing some of the details that he's on would've been, like, basically leaked from an insider or someone who's been stalking on, like, the Jedi's deepest secrets. So, that one I would speculate would go a little further, and maybe that's where Plagueis is kinda like, providing information to him or like paying him to continue with that audit, giving him some breadcrumbs to kind of push his admittedly pretty prevalent anti-Jedi bias. Again, not really much there. It was only like a 5 or 6 minute video, but yeah, I mean, from, like, the little details kinda put out there, I thought that was, like, a pretty strong way. It seems like that's kinda how season 2 would have started off. It would have been just, like, 1 year time skip from season 1. We would have had Plagueis, I still think pretty limited, but you would have been a little bit more as Hugo Damask and that kinda role being built out and fleshed out and seeing how these characters are in a relationship, how they're in their own web of creation and design, and trying to upset the balance of the Galactic Republic, but also in the web of Plagueis and what he's doing from afar. Nothing from Brendok and that mystery, unfortunately. But at the same time, I did kinda like it. Some of the ideas there, it seemed like not only are you developing the best threads of that finale and kinda pushing it forward, but, that could be stuff that's picked up in books. That could be stuff that we can really get to see. The only thing I'm gonna be sad about is just not seeing some of that incredible dueling again. But, I think she also brings up a pretty interesting point of, like, yeah, the writing and direction wasn't there for the concepts. The concepts were never really the big issue. It's just that there was not enough time for her. There wasn't enough with all the ensemble characters to flesh out these characters. It seems like the way these dynamics were set up for season 2, you would have actually gotten a lot of time with May. Yoda would have been a prevalent character in that dynamic with Osha, you got Chimera, and they're back and forth and how they're kind of pulling and pushing each other. It seems like for the most part, it would have been at least conceptually stronger than season 1. So, a little disappointed personally hearing some of that stuff. Like, oh man, that does actually kind of sound appealing to me, especially since we are leaning into more of that Plagueis novel stuff and kind of building up things towards that. But we can definitely still get it in books. I think anyone saying the Acolyte is done is as a show, I fully agree. But as a book, as a multimedia initiative and all that, no, I truly think we could get comics, audio dramas. We can kind of just get a High Republic 2.0 to flesh out the gap, the 100-something year gap between 150-year gap between the end of Phase 3 where we're at in the Acolyte. We already have the 2 books announced, and we've never had a show have tie-ins before. Obviously, they thought the show would do better, so that's probably why. But yeah, I think idea-wise, it's not bad. It's just again, the concepts were there even in season 1. It's just execution, how the money is used. Would they have bigger sets with less characters, which should have always been the case? For every positive that show has, you can always point to, like, something that just doesn't work or just feels like it's been cut down in the editing room or something like that, so, yeah, I'll say I was intrigued. I'd like to see some of those ideas kind of fleshed out, and I think a book would actually be really good for a lot of the stuff with Chimera and Osha, especially, and Yoda and, May and Vernestra, like, those are characters that I think could all have really strong book storylines. But other than that, you know, lightsaber duels, that's the only thing I'd really wanna see. I kind of would be fine in any other media. If they make it animated spinoff, I would be really pleased. I think that's an excellent way. You can make it a Tales of the Jedi, like, season 2, honestly, and, some people will be disappointed, but Tales of the Jedi is just like a pet project anyways. You can get more of the Filoniisms that work. I would trust his direction a little bit more, especially in that medium over Leslie right now with Star Wars. And yeah, I think that's just a good way to honor the fans who definitely enjoyed it, and making sure to continue the legacy of Star Wars, never really letting loose ends go completely off the map of coverage and continuation.
Yeah, I think I was gonna go that same direction with like concept cool, uh, the way it unfolds, the way it's done. I don't trust anything about this show. I mean, you guys know that I don't really like the Acolyte at all. But I was constantly said I'm okay with seeing a season two because I felt so bad that it could only get better, and they had to fix some of the things that they left open uh, at the end of season one. So I'd like to see some of those story points turned into books or comics. I do think they could be better fleshed out in books or comics. Um, as for the Plagueis stuff, as you guys also know, I'm such a big Plagueis fan and such a fan of the Plagueis book that if we never see any of the Plagueis connections again with the Acolyte, I am more than happy. If we do need to tie it in, I think we can do it in a way that still boosts up Plagueis. I just didn't trust the creative team. I didn't trust the way this would be uh, finalized. So I think cool ideas and I think the right direction with a lot of this stuff. Like I'm glad to know they had some direction. That also, makes me take it with an even bigger grain of salt is the fact that they didn't have a season 2 greenlit, so even in concept, these are just things that maybe were discussed once or twice,
Yeah.
these aren't even, like, story points, they're not even, like, there was no way these were even outlines for season 2, it was more just like, "Hey, here's some things we could do with it," and so that makes it, even harder to believe that this is official, and it makes it harder to believe that this actually was talked about before the show was canceled. There's also a good possibility that this could have just been something that somebody came up with recently, whether it's Leslie Headland or somebody else involved with the show. It's like, hey, these are things after hearing people's criticisms. These are some things I think we could do. And that's fair too because they didn't have anything written, so they could have done that as well. But yeah, it's interesting to hear where they would go. I think Yoda being part of the show is the biggest thing that I like that he's more involved. I would like to see more of him. It was certainly disappointing. We only got a back of the head shot in the last scene of the show. So I thought that was pretty much a wasted opportunity. And so I think adding him in would be pretty cool. I don't really like the character of May at all. So anything to improve the character of May, I think would help. And then Osha, I don't really like the character of Osha either, but Osho is a little bit more interesting, a little bit more complex than May. And I think, as in any Sith relationship, a push and pull between the two is inevitable. And I think that would have been semi interesting. Yeah, it's some ideas that certainly in the right hands, I think could be done fairly well. But yeah, that was that story. Let us know what you guys think in the comments. If you guys heard any of those rumors or what your thoughts are on those specific rumors. And now we're going to get back to the chat here. And we have Anthony who says, sorry, I skipped your comment. There we go. Speaking of vampires, are you guys excited to see Bill Skarsgård in Nosferatu? Well, Anthony, you don't know how excited I am. This was my number 2 most anticipated movie of the year. And I think it was my number 1 or 2 last year when it was supposed to come out originally because I love Robert Eggers. And Robert Eggers is one of my favorite film directors working today. He is incredible. The Lighthouse is one of my favorite movies ever. The Witch is coming back into theaters in 2 weeks. Can't wait to see that. I love Robert Eggers, and he's directing Nosferatu, and it's been a project that's been in the works for a very long time, and I think they're gonna nail it. And Nosferatu is as a concept. I mean, it's just Dracula, but with the name Nosferatu. Nosferatu is the name of it's a Latin for vampire, so it's not the name of the actual character. Most people think that's the name of the character. It's Count Orlok, which was just because they didn't have the rights to Dracula, so they called him Count Orlok instead. But yeah, it's the same exact story. It is just in going to be done with the gothic style that was brought into the original Nosferatu film, which is still really, really good. If you haven't seen the silent 1922 Nosferatu movie, still worth checking out because it is a great little horror movie. A lot of good atmosphere. You might recognize Nosferatu from some SpongeBob episodes as well. But yes, I'm very, very, very excited for
Yeah,
that,
that's true.
and cannot wait to see it. It is a little weird that it's coming out on Christmas Day, but I would have preferred it to come out in October, but I will still probably go see it on the 26th or 27th.
Yeah, I guess it's a little interesting because I guess the timeline of the film is around, Christmas, the holiday season. It does seem like winter is kind of where it's all taking place. I have not seen the original. Maybe I've seen clips in like a film class or something, but I don't think I've ever sat down and watched the whole thing. Uh, but I watched the trailer, and I also haven't seen Lighthouse or Witch or anything else from Robert Eggers, so I'm looking forward to watching Lighthouse pretty soon. But
Yes.
uh, yeah, the subject material was a lot more different than I expected, especially with the non-Dracula characters. So I was like, "Oh, so it's it's definitely piqued my interest." It does feel like it has a little bit of not a modern sensibility, but you know, themes that would be pushed now in 2024 that would have been a little bit more artistically hidden if they were made like 20, 30 years ago. Now it feels like Robert Eggers is like, what if I just show you the truth about like how crazy people were in the 1800s and the early 1900s? And it's like, yeah, I can see the appeal. Like the female character storyline, I'm disturbed by and also very intrigued from just the trailer glimpses, so and yeah, I mean, some of the lighting and just the blocking alone, it's
Yeah.
just like, "Oh, man," like, kinda seeing it in, like, the window behind the drapes in the shadow, like, yeah, I was like, "Okay, yeah," so there was a lot of hype for it for sure. I personally just didn't understand because I haven't seen Lighthouse, so now having
Yeah.
seen the trailer, kinda like, like, "Oh, that's something I might be interested in." I assume by December, I'll be very, very hyped for it.
Yeah, and film for me, film is a complete audio visual experience. And it's not necessarily fundamental in story and character. You can have more average story and character. You can have story and character as part of a driving force for incredible visual and incredible audio. And good God, does every Robert Eggers movie have incredible visuals and audio? If you guys haven't seen any Robert Eggers movies, check them out. Even The Northman, which I know is one of his lesser received movies out of the three. He's only done three features. The Northman. If you watch The Northman and you say you don't enjoy the end fight, like I just don't understand that sensibility. It's just an incredible looking duel. It's amazing. I love the Northman too. So yeah, definitely check those out if you guys haven't seen them. That's your homework for the week. Won't we for everybody? I think the North. I don't know. It's either the Northman or the Witch is probably his most accessible movie. The Witch is a slow burn, so I could see some people being bored by that. But I think it's pretty straightforward. The Northman is a little bit more visually trippy, but it is a more traditional plot and has lots of action. So
Yeah,
those are the two that I think most people will like. The Lighthouse is just insanity, but Willem Dafoe's in this
yeah.
also. So
And Nicholas Holt's in this, and I'm
yeah,
kinda excited for him because, I mean, he's played the weird characters in a lot of films, but I think he's kind of going into this weird, like, the sickly seductive weird, recently. I think there's another movie that's based off of real, like, events of this, um, this white supremacist group from Montana or something. It's called that called himself The Order, and he's playing, like, the character. Jude Law is also in it. Um, but he apparently he's gotten a lot of great reviews for that as well. That's coming out at the end of this year or in the next few months as well. This and Eggers, right, film, which, he is one of the leads for. I'm pretty excited because, he is gonna be in Superman. So,
Yeah.
he's gonna be playing Lex Luthor, and we've seen Pattinson, become now once again this, like, incredible actor in the public eye, even though if you've been following more of his indie career, this was already happening post Twilight, and I think Lighthouse is probably, like, the first big film for him relatively that got people to be like, "Oh, he's not just Edward Cullen, he is, like, this fantastic actor that can match up with Willem Dafoe and still kinda do these silly roles on the side for these big franchises." So, yeah, I mean, I'm excited to see if maybe we can see a Nicholas Hoult renaissance because
Yeah.
he also lost out on the role of Batman to Robert Pattinson, so he keeps on losing out the roles on all these, like, big characters and heroes. I think he lost out the role of Superman as well to, Cronenworth, so it's like, this guy is just he's been missing out on, like, a heroish role, but if he's gonna get the dark, sickly, seductive characters and master them, I think that'll only prove to be a big boon for his interpretation of Lex Luthor.
Brandon says, since EA confirmed they're working on the third Jedi game, what new gameplay mechanics would you like to see besides Cal Kestis's combat style, BD1, puzzles, and fast travel and Survivor? Well, for me, the big one was introducing Marin last game
Yeah,
as the kind of an NPC combat helper. I would love to have some ability to play as her at least briefly. For me, two specific games came to mind in the way they could do that style. The first and the older one, and I think the one that's most likely, is Batman Arkham Knight.
yeah,
When
yeah,
you play as Batman the whole game, you can't play as any other character when you're exploring the world of Gotham. But in certain combat situations, you can switch between Batman and Robin, Batman and Nightwing, Batman and Catwoman. And it allows you to do like a finisher, and then that's your transition to the next character. I would
yeah,
love to be able to play as Marin in the next one, especially, I guess we can talk about spoilers for Survivor, right? It's been almost 2 years, especially since, they're together now and they don't seem to be like they're separating anytime soon. And they have their own little family. I think, Marin being a part of the story and about part of the combat is essential. So that's the number one I would like to see. The other game that came to mind for how you could do it is the new Final Fantasy VII remakes, where you are able to switch between any of the characters in your party, very much so like KOTOR style. Um, and you can explore the world and fight with them. And then when one character needs to, dodge an attack, you switch to the next character, and then you can start your fights. You can use up your special moves or use up your magics and then switch to the next character. Now, it has a lot more RPG specific gameplay mechanics that wouldn't really be as applicable to Jedi Fallen Order style games. So I don't know if they'll go that route, but it would be cool to be able to explore as Marin in environment. But I do see them going more the Arkham Knight route, or at least maybe having different level sections where you play some levels as Cal, some levels as Marin. You can't switch in combat necessarily between the two, but you do. I would be surprised if you don't get to play as Marin at all in the next game. So that's the number one I want to see. And I think the second one is I just want an increase on the things we already started in Survivor, like a little bit more exploration. Instead of just having one planet that's fairly open world, have most of them be fairly open world. It is not an open world game, so it can be a limited open world. Like I think Outlaws size or a little bit smaller is good enough for that type of game, and just decide if they want to go out, all out, because we have plenty of Souls like games that have massive open worlds that you can explore. I would like to see a little bit more added to the exploration because Survivor had an exciting post game to me, where Fallen Order did not. Like I went back and played maybe 5-10 hours of Survivor post game, where when I finished Fallen Order, I basically didn't play at all post game and just started a new game plus. So those are the two big ones I would like to see.
Yeah, Brandon Dran. Yeah, like Liam said, we want to be able to kind of play as Marin, right, and use her Night Sister magic. That was the thing we kind of wanted, and we both agreed we wanted in Jedi Survivor. But the story and having them be separated over the course of the events of Battle Scars, or as a result of the events in the Battle Scars book, kind of meant that a lot of the early part of the game is just catch up and stuff like that. There's no way I'd say Cal is like kind of back to being almost like this militant Jedi. Right now, he is on. I'm blanking on the name of the planet that they're on. It's
Oh, the High Republic one.
Yeah, it's not like it's kind of like the canon version of Belsavis. I'm trying to
Hmm.
think of what it's, uh,
It's
mm,
Tanalore, right? Yeah.
yeah, Tantalor, right? So, I don't know how much flexibility they're gonna have, leaving Tantalor without the compasses now, right? I'm assuming they'll figure out a way to use the Force just kinda like how they did, when they kinda did their final jump. But kinda like building off of, like, what Liam said with, like, the open world stuff. I did like a lot of the bounty hunter stuff. It's pretty limited. I'd like to see a couple of like optional side plots to do with
Mhm.
returning characters, and maybe one or two new characters. If there's one thing that I think Outlaws had in structure, but never had a draw for, was having like the characters that you meet alongside in the story once they like kind of go on their own path back in Kobo and all that. Like, maybe if you visit there, some of the residents there, I'd like to see again, maybe Saw Gerrera if there's a mission there that they wanna carry out, or, you know, if there's one of the Jedha, protectors, right? One of those, like, people with seer, like, I'd like to see maybe, like, working with them and doing stuff like that. Because I don't think you have to, like, completely limit his exploration, it's just you have to be a little bit more specific and save much of that for post-game after whatever happens if his character does survive. Um, but if it does happen as, like, an optional route during the middle part of the story, I don't think that would hurt it. I think that would be nice to kinda extend and prolong your time with Cal Kestis if he is meant to be killed by the end of the story or sacrifice himself. For the Marin stuff, though, I think that kinda comes down to the class customization. I'm not saying you have to go, like, Jedi Counselor. I don't think you have to go to that level of insanity, honestly, yeah, where it's, like, that customizable like an MMO. But I think I would like having, like, the options of, like, when you're, like, meditating, you get to see your skill trees and, like, am I better at physical strikes? Am I better at force powers and all that? Expand it up, be like, can we finally see a Jedi learn some Night Sister magic or some combination of the Force and Night Sister magic? It is the same thing, it's just how they're using it. I'd love to see a little bit more other cultures, especially since they're at a High Republic location, maybe the Jedi convocation of all the different Jedi, not Jedi, other Force cults, maybe some knowledge that's been stored there, maybe some stuff that he can learn, um, from the other groups like the Fallen Nasi and other groups, so that way you can kind of create Cal and have different power sets if you want to go in a certain direction, if you want to make him a little less Jedi and more of his own thing. I think that could be a solid option, but yeah, I don't know. The game as it is in Survivor, I like enough. It is more the world and everything else that kind of has to be fleshed out, and you know, potential to explore those planets a bit more. Not necessarily Cal himself. Obviously, continue customizing, getting more outfits and stuff like that. But yeah, I think the Force powers, like you know, going in that direction, especially through Marin, and then some finding new Jedi texts and other Force cultures, and maybe amulets and other maybe if you don't want to use it as like a full-time thing, but like you can use it as like a one-time or two-time use items in like a battle where you can use like and channel a strange force power from an ancient cult or ancient civilization. Like that could be cool. I'd love to see stuff like that where you can use the Jedi series to explore things that don't really make sense in the Skywalker saga or aren't really pertinent, but someone like Cal, who is technically around, Seer, who's been collecting, Cordo, who's been collecting for decades, why not continue that, especially now that he's at this, for the most part, safe planet?
Anthony says, who is your favorite Dracula? Christopher Lee, Bela Lugosi, or Gary Oldman? That's a really tough question. As good as Coppola's Dracula movie is, I think I would pull Gary Oldman out just because I think the other two are a little more iconic. Now, I know Christopher Lee's Draculas are less watched here in the United States because they were Hammer Horror, which is based in England. Um, but Christopher Lee is a great Dracula, and his first movie is really, really great. Like I think it's a better movie than the original Dracula. The original Dracula is just classic. Um, but I think I still have to go Bela Lugosi. He is the one that made the role iconic. So many of the way he delivers his lines, so many of the characteristics about Bela Lugosi translated to every version of Dracula after. He's just it's so good. Like the good evening, like that originated with him. Stuff that feels like indelible parts of who Dracula is, not necessarily from the book, but in the way Bela Lugosi brought him to life. I gotta go with Bela Lugosi.
I can't really say that I've watched any serious Dracula movie in all one sitting. I am curious to see the Coppola one. I've seen the design for Oldman's. That is kind of freaky, not gonna lie, but I wanna see what the whole hype is. And also I'm a Winona Ryder fan, so I'm like, I should have seen this at some point. Isn't this
That's
the one that
good.
also has, like, Keanu Reeves too or
Yep.
something?
Doing the
Yeah, so
British accent.
I'm, like, deeply curious, but also, like, expecting his delivery to be very flat, like he's kinda typically known for. But, we'll see,
Yeah.
we'll see. I'm not I think when you come on this channel, if you're expecting horror, it's from Liam. He's gonna have, like, the full background and everything. I'm pretty new to horror. For me, horror is kind of catching up on, like, 70s and 80s slasher classics, and I kinda started off more so with the elevated horror of the late 2010s, like Hereditary, Midsommar, and stuff like that. I've seen it part 1, but I never saw part 2, I never got around to it, right? So, yeah, I know people don't really like that second part as much, so, yeah, I mean, I'm still pretty fresh, pretty new, but I got a couple. I think Liam finally saw one, that watched, my only Japanese horror film, The Cure. That was I think you like that one from what I've
It's
talked to you
great.
lately about, so,
Yeah, it's great.
yeah, I can't really make a comment about these Draculas yet, but I really can't make a comment about most horror films, so, can't I just wanna put that out there. If we're talking horror, this month is gonna be dominated by this guy.
And I love answering your guys' horror questions. I am planning on the other channel too. Shameless plug again. Check it out. Link in every video and in from the main channel. Um, I'm planning on doing rankings for all the big horror franchises. Right now, I'm making my way through the tail end of Chucky. I've never seen the lesser Chucky movies, so I have two more to watch, and then I'm gonna do those. But yep, I've got Friday the 13th, Halloween, Nightmare on Elm Street, all those. I love to me Halloween, like not the movie, the season and the time of year, the holiday. It's what makes me feel like Halloween season is watching slashers. So I go with a lot of slashers this time of year, but in September I was watching a lot more of the like great horror movies of all time, the more tourist horror movies. I'll probably switch back to that because I still want to keep watching horror even after Halloween's over. So, but yeah, this time of the year I watch a lot of slashers and a lot of bad slashers, and that just makes it feel like Halloween. But yeah, thanks for that question. I actually bought. I do like collection updates for a lot of my other collections that aren't Star Wars related on the other channel too, and I had bought this summer a pretty cool box set that had every Universal classic monster movie in it, from The Mummy, Frankenstein, not just the original ones, but like I think it was 30 movies. So I want to go through that too as well because I've mostly only seen the originals and then a couple of the sequels. So that'll be a fun one to go through as well. But yeah, thanks for the question. Back to the chat, we got Brandon Tran who says, "Do you think Rex and Echo working with Dr. Emery at the end of Bad Batch season 3 could lead to their own spin-off show, Rex and the Boys?" Yes, and we've been wanting that for a while. We've been talking about that, especially on these streams. I did a whole video about it back in May about where you could go with that, about the future of the Bad Batch and post and the Clone Wars animation style. You can go check that one out if you haven't seen it. But it is, I think, the main direction they can send this show. I mean, outside of, as Sunix also discussed in a video of his own, the Ventress random appearance in the Bad Batch that is obviously just bringing her back for something here in the future, whether it's a show fully centered around her or her being a main part of another show they're working on. They brought her back for no reason other than to tell people she's back. And so, other than that, I think the main direction they have is the fact that Rex is similarly a main character of the Bad Batch, but also only appears every once in a while to remind you he's still around to set up some other things around the world building of Rex and the clone rebellions and stuff. So, yeah, certainly a Rex and clones, a Rex and the Boys show, Rex and Clone Rebellion show is certainly, I think, the odds-on favorite for what the future of Clone Wars animation and the story of the clones will be in an upcoming animated series.
Yeah, that I mean, it is the question of if they're gonna keep it to the Bad Batch scope where there are notable things happening in the galaxy, like, regardless of how Bad Batch ended up being, being very family centered, a little bit more focused on just their development and another, like, I guess, a more pure focus on what clones and their individuality and their family structures and who they can be is like, especially at the start of the Empire when they've completely erased whatever growth they've had in the Clone Wars for the rest of the Galactic Army. It was a show that I think when we all watched it, especially with that premiere episode, we're like, "Oh my god, this is gonna, like, lead straight into Clone Rebellion. This is gonna have them either play direct roles or be symbolic of what the Clone Rebellion by Rex is gonna be looking like. What's going on with Cody? Like, are we gonna see him?" Like, there was a lot of questions, a lot of teasers for that first 2 seasons, and look, even if Mount Tantus showed up several times in the show and it did have some pretty notable stuff happening, I wouldn't say it was as big as we expected it to be when we first had the show premiering. So if it's going to be shaped and sized the same way as Bad Batch, it would just be kind of Rex's band. And I don't know if I necessarily want just that. I kind of want to see Rex to be someone who's like an organizer for multiple cells and all that. Like if it's just contained in one cell, then I'd rather just continue watching the Bad Batch and having them appear because it almost feels like that small of a focus. While it would be cool, it would feel too similar to the Clone Wars. And if you're looking to get that emotionality, well, you've already got it done with the Bad Batch already for 3 seasons. So like Liam kind of put in his video, posited in his video, right? It makes sense to make it big, and if you're gonna make it big, have different arcs about different things happening in the dark times, right? This is a great way to almost, like, honor those early dark times comics that started really popping up around 2011, 2012, just before canon, was reset under Disney and all that, right? Where you can bring in Gungi's friends and stuff like that, where you can still deal with, like, Han Solo's early Imperial days as a cadet, where you can have the Ventress storyline, which has no real purpose and it doesn't really fit season 3. It's like a pocket episode, it's a backdoor pilot, so it has to be a bigger show with multiple arcs in my mind. If you do a bunch of small shows, I would only want them if they were like mini series, like limited series where it's like, okay, here's your 8 episodes of Rex's Rebellion. Here's your 8 episodes of Ventress and Quinlan and the Path. And at that point, why not just make a bigger all contained show, Dark Times as your title or something like that, where it's all encompassing of this middle period that, yes, even if it is a fleshed out era, we still haven't really gotten past that first 5-year mark outside of what Jedi Fallen Order, Jedi Survivor, some of the comics, right? Like this would be like the stamp, right? As Liam kind of puts in his video there. And I agree with that because the ideas introduced with the title of the Bad Batch were never going to be fully fulfilled, and it would have run into the same problem as Ahsoka. It would have run into the same problem as the Mandalorian, where once you kind of name it after a character, it limits just how effective and easy to understand what the story is going to be, what you're actually following here. So yeah, whatever comes next, it has to be Dark Times focused, and it should contain all the different possibilities of Dark Times, not just mini series, limited series, special feature length episodes and stuff like that. So, yeah, I would prefer something like that. Will it happen? I don't know, man. We haven't heard any news for animation. I think at this point, I was expecting to hear something. Maybe New York Comic Con will get something there, like a tease, because they are supposed to be there with the rest of the Disney folks for Marvel and everything else. So we need to start hearing some stuff because animation is always 2-3 years ahead of like other like live
Yeah.
action stuff like that too. So something's happening. We just don't know yet. And obviously 2025 being the Japan celebration, right? A big anniversary with Revenge of the Sith and The Force Awakens. It seems right after the first 2 seasons of Visions to go for a dedicated one studio driven Star Wars anime. Even if people will dismiss it, it's just a great way to go for that because anime is so big now. Like everyone our generation watches it. Kids who are younger, like Gen A and all that, right? They're growing up without any of the biases that even we kind of face those like first
Yeah.
5-10 years of our life. Now it's just like I watch My Hero Academia. I watch Demon Slayer. That is what I'm watching alongside some of the random stuff on Cartoon Network and Nickelodeon stuff. It's just another thing and arguably the better thing for them to watch these days. So yeah, I mean, it's very curious that we haven't gotten any inkling of an idea what the animation is going for, and hell, we might be completely wrong. Maybe they're just jumping into like sequel territory or something that's set in like one of the decades of the New Republic, maybe a Luke Jedi Academy. Like we really don't know, and usually we have a clue, but right now nothing.
Yeah. No, definitely. And I did drop the links to both videos in the chat if you guys would like to check them out if you haven't seen them or it's been months since you've seen them and you want to refresh yourself. Those videos are linked in the chat now. But yeah, I think the animation, they're never going to let the Clone Wars animation style go. They put too much money into it and they perfected it too much. There's no way it ever disappears. I think we're getting towards the territory of needing 2 animated shows going on at the same time, and there's really no reason why not to. I think it's something that a lot of Star Wars fans are really interested in, and yeah, it might not sell Disney Plus like they were hoping it would, or like season 7 of the Clone Wars did in the peak of the pandemic, but I think it's going to be something that will keep Star Wars fans subscribed in between dead periods in live action, especially right now where right now the only live action show we know that's coming out next year is Andor season 2. It'll be the first time in years that we've only had one live action Star Wars show in a year. So I think that'll be the animation will be where you can kind of fill those gaps for those hardcore fans and try to keep them subscribed while you wait for a year to get your next anime or your next live action show. So it'll be interesting to see where they go with that. Critical Thinker says, "What are your thoughts on Star by Star?" For those of you who don't know, that's a new Jedi Order book. I was reading parts of that novel today, and it's still so good. Yeah, it is. It's great, and it is one of Troy Denning's best books, and it is a book that really shifts the entirety of the new Jedi Order. It's something that um, without giving any spoilers away for people, it's the one that really sets forward a lot of the most memorable stories in the New Jedi Order and really completely changes the tide of the war and the stakes of the war. So I don't want to spoil it for those people who haven't checked it out, but it's a great one. You certainly should check it out.
Yeah, I can't really add more to that. No, we're definitely looking forward to reading New Jedi Order and kind of doing book clubs around the rest of the Bantam books. We're definitely almost ready to announce. I think today we'll put out a poll or something, but just to let
Oh
you
yeah.
guys know, probably at the end of next month after we drop a review a week or something for the first 4 Stackpool X-Wing books, we're gonna do the X-Wing Legends Book Club, and we'll have a specific date. We'll put out that live a little earlier too, just the date out there so that way, even if it's adjusted, it's still on your feed. You'll make sure you put the ringer notification on so you know that it's coming. Catch up on the books or just skim through them or even read the Wikipedia so, summaries for them if you wanted to kind of like talk about essentially what is the Top Gun series of early legends, right? But Star by Star, only thing I can really add to that is probably one of the better Troy Denning books. I think being part of that initiative with so many other authors who had really sharpened their teeth with Bantam and everything else, he didn't really try to do too much. There are still a lot of Denning isms in there, but um, not necessarily as unhinged as he is in Legacy of the Force and Fate of the Jedi. So um, I would say that's why it's probably one of the better books because he's trying to fit in instead of fitting out as he starts kind of doing with later legends.
Yeah, he's still a newbie during New Jedi Order to Star Wars. He wasn't as established as he was later on in other book initiatives. Critical Thinker says favorite Clone Wars arc besides Siege of Mandalore. Well, my two easily for me are Mortis. I've always loved Mortis. That was, I remember, one of the first times watching Clone Wars every single week when it came out, every episode every week. That was one of the first times where I remember it being incredibly locked in on like I can't wait to see what happens next week because season 3 really went full in on the arcs, and that was the one you shift the animation style, and then obviously it tells one of the fundamental lore stories in what is now Star Wars. So Mortis has always been one of my favorites, and then my second favorite, it doesn't really have a name. I've always either called it the Shadow Collective arc or Maul on Mandalore, and it's would be, I believe, season 5, episodes 14, 15, and 16, and then also if you want to include episode 1, where Maul has that first confrontation with Obi-Wan post his return. That's one of my favorites. I love what it does, not just for the character of Maul and how much we've seen him explored over the years, but also what it does for Obi-Wan and Obi-Wan's relationships and Obi-Wan's relationship with Maul specifically. And it starts the Siege of Mandalore stuff basically. And yeah, it's so good. I go back and forth. I think that's my favorite arc to rewatch. The Mortis stuff is some of my favorite because I love the lore that's in it. But yeah, those were probably my two. Umbara would be close behind it, but I don't think it touches those two for me.
Yeah, I think Umbara for sure, just because that's so important to Rex and Fives and the Five of Firsts as a whole. As I've gotten older, I do think the Pong Krell stuff is a little one note in some ways, but like that, come on, for an animated kid show, they do so well with that. Um, Again, like Liam said, the Shadow Collective Maul and Mandalore arc is really good. That's the most unhinged that character really gets before he reaches kind of that breaking point that he's at with Son of Dathomir and uh, obviously the battle, the Siege of Mandalore arc that ends off the Clone Wars. I'm a big fan of the Yoda arc, actually. I think that one in season 6, I believe it's a good one because it really grapples with okay, we've got Dooku always saying you can't have like a leader be alive for that many centuries and stay in power that long without it corrupting them or like at the very least ignoring the flaws and all that of the Jedi Order and their place in the galaxy and all that. So you not only do you get to have like that fun force journey with Qui-Gon Jinn's voice kind of leading him to start making the first moves in his post mortem like continuation into the force manifestation. I think it's really good because he really reckons with, am I doing enough? Am I what will be the end of this war? Does it even matter how the war ends? How should I look? Should I stay focused on the present? Should I look forward to what's next? How do I listen to the force and all that? And obviously, being such a long-lived species, I think no matter what, the practicalities of the position don't really line up with the practicalities of his longevity. And I think that was a pretty interesting look at like what he would be like. And it's definitely been continued with that pretty underrated Yoda miniseries that came out last year as well, like how Yoda treats everything and deals with everything. So this was like kind of like that prequel trilogy era. Okay, he's been bogged down by so much of the present day stuff when he used to be someone who just listened to the Force, and sometimes decades and years would pass by him, right? He couldn't do that obviously with a whole galaxy kind of depending on the Jedi and all that. So it is pretty fun, and it's a storyline that you think is just about Force training and stuff like that, and seeing, oh, the Darth Bane spirit kind of manifested here and there. You know, shout out Mark Hamill doing a really fun the Darth Bane voice that I'd love to see continued again. But yeah, that is like that second storyline, and, like, when he's kinda grappling and trying to finally see the identity of Palpatine, kinda sees Anakin already behead Dooku and all that. It's like there's a lot of acceptance for that character, and it really does mark for me, like, that transition away from that prequel trilogy Yoda that we know to more of the kooky old man who's obviously present throughout episode 5, 6, and even in his lesson in episode 8. So I like that one. Obviously, the Fives arc, huge fan of that. Huge fan of Fives as a character. That's my favorite clone. It's just tragic, right? And seeing Order 66, even if you don't like the concept of the biochips, I think how it's used and how Fives is reacting, working to save his brother, save the Republic, and realizing everyone just sees him as a madman and all that tragic ending. Yeah, I mean, really good, really strong. I'd love to see one day some exploration of, like, the nightmares. They're finally over, right? Of kind of like that endless battle with everyone dying around them, the simulations, they're finally over, right? That line has always, like, been stuck in my head, like, the past decade or so, because I do wonder if these clones, is it a result of the war? Is it the result of the flash training? Is it a result of their biochip? Is this just something that the Force is trying to, like, tell them, right? It's a very interesting line to kind of end his story on, and I wish more other clones said it or referenced it. I don't know if it's just a Fives thing or like a someone who's lived that long into the war. That's just how his psyche is processing. But yeah, I mean, I'd love to see some exploration there. And also, I mean, people always forget about this one now, but the Ahsoka one, the Rogue Jedi one, like that is such an underrated arc.
Yeah.
I think it's because we got to see immediately Rebels kind of pick it up. We got to kind of see like, oh, it's a cop out for her not dying, like a lot of us assumed would happen. But it's still very good on its own, right? To have been trained by a Jedi that she has grown wary of, and some of his inhibitions, some of his vices, some of his failures as a Jedi in Anakin, but still respects, loves him deeply, and treats him with more respect than she would the Jedi Council. And then seeing the Council just like they have throughout the Clone Wars, hiding things from Anakin, working against Anakin, do the same to her, even though she's always been of the best character. She's always done what's best for the Order, right? She's been a hero, right? It was nice. It was what made people really appreciate Ahsoka, from just being the whiny kid saying snips and Sky Guy to a little bit more mature, to like, wow, she made like an ideological choice, and her kind of final goodbye with Anakin so underrated when she's like, I understand, right? I know what's going on there. It kind of loses some of its weight with Filoni kind of bringing back Ahsoka again and again and again now. I'm really hoping that she gets a proper conclusion or gets elevated to some Force God or something with the Mortis stuff going on the Ahsoka show. But as far as her character and writing and all that, that's probably peak story for me there. I think that's kind of where her character arguably reached its zenith, right? And it's she's never been so convinced of who she is, what she has to do in that moment, even if it is the most painful thing. she probably had to do in her entire life outside of Order 66.
Critical Thinker says, "What do you think they should do with Ventress now that she's somehow returned?" And then piggybacking off of that, Anthony says, "Do you guys think that Asajj and Quinlan will meet again sometime after 18 BBY?" Well, we kind of just talked about it a little bit ago when we were talking about the future of Rex, but they're definitely going to put her in a show. If they don't put her in a show, or at least a big major arc of a Clone Wars esque arc based show, I don't know why they brought her back. And that'll be really, really frustrating because right now she's in this like weird nebulous area where I hate that she's back because I love Dark Disciple and I think it's a great end for her character. Um, and she's in a weird spot where it feels like they just brought her back because they needed somebody for a commercial for the Bad Batch because it did get everybody talking. Everybody was like, "Oh man, Ventress is back." And I hope that's not just what they do. Maybe they heard people's reactions like ours, and they're like, "Hey, we need to actually do something with her now because people aren't happy we just used her as a marketing gimmick." But I think at the very least, she needs to be a part of some major arcs. And yes, involving Quinlan, since we know he's alive up until 10 BBY at least, with the path in Obi-Wan Kenobi. So we know he's around for a lot longer. I think she needs to reunite with him. They need to do some type of show, some type of aftermath. I don't know if another death for Asajj is going to mean that much. I think they could do a definitive death for her in live, and not live action, but in animation where most people know her. Uh, but yeah, I don't know at this point if we're constantly bringing a character back. We need to both explain why she's back, and we need to give her at least some story-based reasons for existing. But yeah, I do think they're planning on using her, whether it's a show based on around her and Quinlan, or it's a show that she's a part of.
Yeah, I don't know, man. It's gonna be interesting no matter what they do. I prefer the arc format just because I don't know how much you can really do with the hidden path. I mean, at some point it almost has to cross over with what Seer and Cordova are doing, right? But how far can you go in the timeline with Quinlan, with Asajj before it starts becoming a little impractical? Like, I guess those are two characters I think could live for a pretty long time, but in my mind, I think they die in that era. I think that is their resting place, right? Maybe Quinlan a bit, but I ultimately you don't have to have everyone survive. I don't know how an Asajj Ventress meeting a Luke and Ahsoka in the New Republic era is super appealing to people, right? I think other characters that start off their story in the Dark Times, like a Cal Kestis, like a Kanan, unfortunately gone, but an Ezra now with so much possibility to show up in rumors and Mandalorian and Grogu and all that, right? That makes more sense to me because their story is just starting. They're just entering their prime. But the Dark Times is kind of following the primes after they're coming to an end for Quinlan, for Asajj. And Asajj, like you said, Liam, she had a good ending to me. I don't think I necessarily need her to come back. She's not back, so what is gonna be more definitive than, like, the sacrifice for your lover, right? So it's like, okay, are they changing the dynamic? Is it like this rebirth is gonna be something kinda twisted that we see Asajj, despite her best intentions, slipping away or is only there temporarily, like, this is an extra boon of her sister's? There's a lot of questions, just the nature of a resurrection that I think an arc can handle, an elongated arc, like 8 episodes, kinda like Dark
Yeah.
Disciple. Um, yeah, but I don't know. I'm not really sure how far in the timeline you can really go before it's like, well, then why isn't Asajj helping? Why isn't Quinlan helping? Right? Like these are characters that if you're gonna be part of that pat structure, why wouldn't Seer mention it in the games, right? I get a Quinlan on the wall, all right, and Obi-Wan being surprised and all that, because he can be his own loner character, fit in and out, kind of go back to his original planet and that society there. But I think at the end of the day, the story ends with either both of them dead or Asajj dead practically. And Quinlan kind of just retiring away and maybe cameoing at best in the future. And I honestly, I just want them both to have proper ends to their story, and I think the Dark Times is probably where they can have that defining end, as opposed to, oh look, another Force user during the New Republic era that suddenly Luke is trying to balance and work with. Like, sure, makes there's a compelling case that that's what makes it even harder for him to really get his Jedi Order started off. But then I don't know that there's just too many of these other Force users, these other pseudo Jedi, not Jedi's. Ahsoka is more than enough to, you know, put him in this questioning position. Maybe a Cal Kestis and Marin, but after that, I think you're pushing it a little too far before a new generation should rise up and should start filling those slots. So, yeah, that's where I would leave them. Extended arc, Dark Times. Finish it there.
Critical Thinker says, and this is a very tough question, favorite video games you've played. So, I mean, that's like, that's like saying what's your favorite movie or what's your favorite book. There's so many. And for me, I do consider myself a bit of a gamer. I'm not as hardcore as a lot of people. I don't, buy every game when it comes out, but I play most games that people like within a year. And I've played a lot of games over my life. um, and I don't have one that's like my favorite. I go back to all sorts, and I think games almost even more so than film or TV or books. Genres almost even more important to games, or at least play style. Because a lot of games, they could be a horror game, but you could make a horror game that's survival horror. It could be third person horror. It could be action horror. It could be first person horror. And every game is experienced in a different way because of that. So for me, I had to pull up a list I had made a long time ago. So there's probably some I'm forgetting of some of my favorites. But off the bat, I'd say one that's probably in my top five all time, if I had to make one, would be Bioshock. I love Bioshock. I love the stories and I love the gameplay. And it's always been one that I've loved. I've replayed it probably at least 4 or 5 times. That's an all-time game for me. So Bioshock, big fan of the Batman Arkham games. I was a huge Assassin's Creed guy when I was growing up, and the original Assassin's Creed, especially the Ezio trilogy, I really enjoyed. But I would say 2 and Brotherhood, and then Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag. But again, I don't think I'd include any of those in like my favorite games ever. I think Bioshock Infinite is incredibly underrated. I don't think it deserved any of the criticism really got back when it came out. It's certainly a grand story, and I can see some criticism around story in certain spots. I loved it, but I think gameplay wise, it's excellent. So I love that. I love the new God of War games that have come out. 2018 was a massive surprise. I still prefer that over Ragnarok, even if Ragnarok is so much better in every way, gameplay wise. Like it's like Survivor to Fallen Order. It's so much better. But the original God of War story from 2018 was my favorite, and I did really love the original three, but it's a very different tone. So, and then there's just the fun open world side of games, something like Grand Theft Auto, 4 and 5. 3 is also great. San Andreas, Red Dead Redemption 2. Um, for me, though, one of the greatest stories of all time, and now people are starting to obviously see it. It's always been a popular game, but The Last of Us is, I think, the seminal video game story. And then carrying off of that, Uncharted and Uncharted 2, especially Uncharted 4. And then one of my favorite video game series, yes, from Nintendo. Obviously, you have Super Mario, which Galaxy has always been my favorite. I love both Galaxy games. Odyssey is also incredible. And then if we're going 2D, Mario Bros. 3, Mario World. And I do think recently, like the 2.5D Mario 3D World and stuff like that is also great. Bowser's Fury was really cool. But Zelda is my favorite Nintendo franchise. And Breath of the Wild is one of my favorite video games ever. But every Zelda game is great, whether it's Breath of the Wild, Ocarina of Time, Tears of the Kingdom, Wind Waker, especially HD, Majora's Mask, Link to the Past, Link Between Worlds, Twilight Princess, even Skyward Sword is really great as a game, despite the motion controls. So all those, and then another open world-ish game that I devoted a lot of time into, and it's one of my favorite things that I've ever played. Is for sure The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt, one of the great games of all time. And, I could go on forever. Like, if want horror games, I love Resident Evil. I'm a huge fan of the Resident Evil series, whether it's the remake of the original, the new remakes, Resident Evil 2 and 4 remakes especially were excellent, but Resident Evil 4 was already perfect, so you didn't need to make it much better. And then I'll round it out with God, I'm gonna, there's so many. I'm scrolling through this like list, and there's so many I'm gonna be sad I don't mention, but one of my passions as a kid, and then rediscovering it. It's been with me my whole life, but more so discovering in the last few years again and really replaying everything is Pokemon. And so the OG Pokemon games, from Red, Blue, and Yellow to Gold, Silver, Crystal, Ruby, Sapphire, Emerald. Emerald, I think, is the greatest Pokemon game ever. And then you have Diamond and Pearl, which I also really like. Platinum's better. And then, of course, Black and White 2, I think, are excellent as well. So, yeah, could go on forever. And I'm sure I'll have more to even say after Sonic's done. But video games are certainly one of my favorite things. And yeah, let us know what some of your guys' favorite games are as we continue to ramble down our favorites.
Yeah, for me, gaming kind of peaked when I played Platinum, and then I followed it up with Soul Silver. I think Soul
Yes.
Silver, in my mind, Heart Gold Soul Silver is the peak of the Pokemon franchise. Emerald's a good shot because obviously the Battle Frontier and everything is so well done and all that, but I don't know. I think like the features of the Pokeathlon and all that, it just felt like they've really unleashed themselves. That is the peak of the handheld era of Pokemon to me, and revising an old game that was already 2 regions and then adding on all these extra features and all that. The Pokeometer, which I screwed it up as a kid. I thought I saw some clear case mods. I'm like, I'll just use like an X-Acto knife and rub off the paint on this one that's already scratched up. Did not work, but I bought a crystal case mod, and they don't sell it anymore, but I bought it off eBay, and then I messed up the sound cable for that, but finally got a friend to help me solder it, so now it's working again, which is crazy after, like, what, 13 years, so and you can't see it here, but on this little side table that I have here, I have my Japanese Nintendo new 3DS. I sold my old 3DS, got a new 3DS, modded it for the US region. I got a copy of Fire Red, Omega Ruby, um, I got the Gates to Infinity, Super Mystery Dungeon. I'm a big Mystery Dungeon fan. This Pokemon stuff. Explorers the Sky is probably the best Pokemon Mystery Dungeon game ever. It's genuinely perfect. I can't wait to replay that. I have so many memories of just playing that under the covers for like 3 or 4 hours straight on school night and all that. I just love the story of that. Yeah, I mean, I also have finally got a copy of Black 2, which, man, they're so expensive to get these days. I'm surprised they even got Fire Red, but Black 2, some people are selling for like $300. This guy just sold it to me for 80. Very happy I got hands on that. I even bought a DS Lite just to play those games. I always play them on DSi, so I still need to play Fire Red and all that, so I'm planning to. I started Fire Red, but I've taken a bit of a break. I wanna run through from Fire Red all the way till Switch games. Hopefully by then, Switch 2 will be out so I can catch up on the Pokemon Switch games and be ready for the next ones. I've heard mixed things because of graphics and performance issues and DLCs and all that. But, I want to get back into the series. I think I just got burnt out when I was like first really getting into Pokemon Black. I used to follow all the news on Cerebi.net and all that, and then I played it. I guess I missed having the old Pokemon and the old national decks, and having all new Pokemon felt like a full reset, which I didn't really love. But yeah, I'm excited to play all those games again. A game that I don't know why, but I played a decent amount of is Dead Space. I know they did a remake
Good one.
recently that was really well done too. Um, I was not ready for that in middle school, and I don't think I'm still ready for it. But uh, that one was pretty good. Um, man, I'm trying to think of Control. That's a pretty good one as well. It's a little bit more of like an tourist video game, if you can really say that, but
Yeah.
I do like that one quite a bit. I still need to finish it, but I like the ambiance, the atmosphere quite a bit. Um, man, I still need to finish Baldur's Gate 3, but from what I've played, I really enjoyed it, and I think that's been I think it won Game of the Year last year, so yeah,
Mhm.
that's a great one as well. Uh, Eventually wanna get into Cyberpunk again. Mm, there's a couple
Could go
games that I'm
on
blanking
forever. It's
on. I've tried Disco Elysium. I know people really like that
it's a
one.
good one. Yeah.
I wanna kinda play it again for play it properly for, like, the narrative consequences and all that. Wanna play more Zelda games. I have Ocarina of Time on 3DS, but the 3DS original 3D would mess up my head because it didn't have head tracking, so my eyes would just get strained all the time playing it that way. So I don't think you really need to play it with the 3D, but, like, when you have the feature,
No.
why not, right? So, hopefully the new tracking is better. I'm trying to think what other games. Low key, Wii Sports Resort. I used to play that at a friend's house quite a lot. It's
Yeah.
really fun. I loved just the competitiveness of Wii Sports too, but Wii Sports Resort just has so much going on, like basketball, playing with your glider and all this and that. Oh man, I'm trying to think of like other games that I played Ori and the Blind Forest. That
It's
one
a
is
good
really
one.
good too. I never played I started the second game, but I'd finished the first game like the first few months of COVID, and I tried starting the second game, and I just haven't gone around to playing it again. Probably will at some point, but I really like that first game for the puzzles and everything, and it's just a nice, sweet game. Eventually, though, I will be playing Stardew Valley. I think that's like the type of game that I will
It's a good one too.
fully like put myself into, and I don't know. There's more appeal for me for a game like that than necessarily like a Minecraft and all that. I played Minecraft a bit in middle school and high school, but never had the same appeal to me. And then my friends transitioned to League of Legends, and that was just too toxic after some time and a time dump. So I'm more of a single player game guy anyway. So I think those are the kind of games that'll kind of try to jump back into or I've already started playing or have fond memories of. What else is there? There's one more that I'm thinking of that I'm blanking on. There's one more. What is it? What is it? I don't know. I'm blanking on it now completely. Okay, not really that, but I think when I think of gaming these days, Dungeons and Dragons. That's really fun. RPG style games. That is kind of what Baldur's Gate is, but I think as you get older and you get to actually play more of RPG style with game engines and the concept of a game engine is so much different when you're actually playing it as a almost like a board game style. Dungeons and Dragons is great. At some point on this channel, I want to be able to run some sort of Star Wars RPG out here because there's so many like Western game books, source books that are the sources of even today's current lore that's being implemented in canon and all that. And I think it'd be really great to honor that old Star Wars tradition that is very underrated and not many people talk about. One day I will get into Warhammer, but maybe I'll start off with that new Warhammer game that came out recently as like my entry point. But yeah, those are kind of the games that I like that I'm interested in. I'm definitely more of a single player game guy for sure.
Yeah, it's an endless topic. I mean, we could go on forever. So maybe next time, for anybody who wants to know even more of our favorite games, come up with some certain genres like FPS or puzzle or RPG, and then I think it could break it down a little easier. But yeah, I could. I mean, I have a list of like probably 200 games that I've really loved that I made in the past. Um, I know, Anthony on here, we've talked about how, much we both like Mass Effect. So that's another great one as well. But yeah, I feel like puzzle games are the one thing we didn't really mention as much. Like, I'm a big Tetris guy. I play Tetris 99 a lot. I've won a couple times, and it is a very proud achievement. But yeah, Portal, Tetris, uh, any version of Tetris is usually pretty great. I love Tetris Attack as well. If you guys have a Super Nintendo, and it's also called Planet Puzzle League if you got it later on your DS. But yeah, we could go on forever, but I think that's going to be the question that wraps up tonight's stream. We almost went about 2 hours, so thanks to everybody who's joined us for the entirety of this this run. Again, we had a poll up, put it up later. I forgot. I meant to put it up at the beginning of the video or the stream, but it is about Legends Book Club. So for those of you who have missed it, Legends Book Club, we've said it in a few streams ago when somebody asked. Legends Book Club is being transformed into kind of two versions. We started it as a video series where we were hoping you guys would send in your comments and really discuss the book in the comments section, and where we would also have these big, long discussions about the book. And we enjoyed doing that, but obviously, YouTube algorithm not super friendly to really long videos about book reviews from 25 years ago. So we've retooled it. We're going to be doing a live where we can have our full on, discussion about the book. Sanak and I going back and forth, but we really want it to be similar to this, where you guys join us and you tell us your favorite things about the book or one of your favorite characters in the book. Do all of that, and then we can really have a fun little discussion. The videos, the streams could range anywhere between 30 minutes, if not that many people show up, to an hour and a half if everybody shows up and wants to discuss. So I did put up a poll here in the chat. I'm not sure how these polls work when the chat's over. I assume it closes. And we can put one up in the main community section as well here in the few days, with 4 options for dates for Legends Book Club. We're not planning on that Legends Book Club stream replacing our, ask us anything that we do every week. So whatever week we do it, it's going to be an additional stream on top of the Tuesday ones you get every single week. So stay, keep planning on these Tuesday streams. They still will be coming. But we threw up a couple days that worked for us here in the next couple weeks. But in addition to that, we will also be releasing reviews in a little bit shorter format, similar to how we do for new canon books and similar to how I did for my reviews of the other 2 X-Wing books that we put up that tied into the Essential Legends releases. And I will be covering the last book, Solo Command, when that Essential Legends release comes out in a couple weeks as well. So stay tuned for all that stuff. We were going to be putting out reviews for each one of the 4 Rogue Squadron books, starting with Rogue Squadron, obviously, Wedge's Gamble, back to Krytos Trap, then Back to War. So we will do an individual review for each one of those for people who just want to hear our thoughts and a score. And then if you want to discuss the book with us, which we're hoping you all do, join us for one of the lives, and we will, like Sanak said earlier, let you know and create a live room like we usually do with this stream. But instead of it being 3, 4, 5 hours before the stream, we're going to do it. We want to do it a couple weeks before the stream starts. So hopefully you guys join those streams. We really enjoyed discussing Star Wars books, and we want to we love doing these live streams with all of you. And even with the hour and a half to 2 hour time block we give for this, it never feels like enough. There's always so much to talk about, and we really appreciate all you guys coming and joining. So we want to give you as many streams as possible. We also do offer streams for certain perks and tiers on our memberships and Patreon programs. So if you want to check those out, you could get even more streams if you want to discuss stuff with us. But we want to, keep giving you guys as many streams as possible. And certain ones like Legends Book Club just made sense for that style. So check that poll out. Check out the channel. Keep an eye on the live tab for a future upcoming scheduled live for Legends Book Club. And can't wait to discuss it all with you. And we will have a review out for Rogue Squadron probably sometime at the beginning of next week. And then tomorrow morning, you'll be seeing a review up for Mace Windu, The Glass Abyss. We finished our review yesterday, and I didn't have time to finish editing it today. So it's going up tomorrow morning. And you guys will see that as well for those people interested in that book. So thank you so much for watching tonight's stream. Make sure you like. We do have a lot more people watching right now than have liked the video. It helps us out a lot. Subscribe for more stuff just like this. If you're just finding us, we do this every single Tuesday. Keep an eye out for the live scheduling. Thank you so much for watching, everybody, and we will see you all next week.